love a dramatic way of coming into the show, folks. Good evening and welcome in to Coosa Valley Magazine. I'm Jim Green. I shot that video last night over at DeSoto Caverns. They've got their big show for Halloween going on, and I'm going to tell you, they have outdone themselves. Now, of course, there's a little additional charge and so forth, but listen, they've got the haunted maze. The cave tour is a haunted tour. It's going to be just really fantastic. They've got some performers over there and just doing a wonderful, wonderful job. We did a pretty wonderful job this week, if I do say so myself. We've got a renowned scholar coming up to talk about one of the great book publications in the last 50 years, maybe even longer than that. And then we've got the Citizen of the Year from here in Sylacauga. All of that is coming up tonight on Coosa Valley Magazine, and we'll get started right after we do this.
At Toyota of Sylacauga, we're capping off our record-breaking year with our record-breaking discounts. This is the sale you've been waiting for.
Get huge Toyota of Sylacauga discounts. Up to $4,000 off on Corolla. Up to $4,500 off on Sienna. Up to $5,500 off on Prius. And up to $7,000 off on your choice of Avalon or Camry.
Online 24/7 at toyotaofsylacauga.com. Get ready to smile.
Camping World would like to introduce you to a whole new world. Say hello to a fresh day. Step out to adventure. Explore and discover an amazing world. Be in arm's reach of wonderful. Camping World, the #1 RV and camping expert, wants you to say hello to a whole new world.
Say hello to great deals during the RV sales event. Visit your local Camping World today.
In Central Alabama, 9,100 kids face going to bed hungry tonight. Hunger doesn't take a day off. There are kids right here, right now, that don't know where they'll get their next meal. Join Alabama Childhood Food Solutions and help put an end to childhood hunger in Central Alabama. Make a difference. Donate today, by mail or online, to help ACFS feed hungry kids. There's no better time to share than now. Their next meal could come from you.
Any meal, anytime, it's a Huddle House on Highway 280. From the popular Huddle House Signature Waffle to our Big House breakfast, including gravy and biscuit and loaded hash browns, it's a Huddle House. Try our Philly cheese steak omelet. It's a sure hit, too. Our Big House sandwich combos include Huddle Burger and Country Fried Steak. And for lunch or dinner, it's the often requested chopped steak with mushroom gravy. Starting to get hungry? Head to the Huddle House. Our friendly and experienced team await you. Huddle House, Highway 280, any meal, anytime.
Welcome back into Coosa Valley Magazine. I don't know if I introduced myself, but if you're new to this, I'm Jim Green, and we do this every Sunday night right here on TV 47, and from time to time, I think we're even on the Alabama Cable Network. We got to interview one of the bright lights in education around the state of Alabama, a history professor, a Baptist minister, all around nice guy. Dr. Wayne Flint was in town to do the Brown Bag series at the B.B. Comer Memorial Library, and he talked about his good friend Harper Lee, Nell Harper Lee as he calls her, and the publication of her book, Go Set a Watchman. Really interesting, and after it was all done, we went to the Cornelia Foote reading room there at B.B. Comer Library and had this opportunity to talk with Dr. Flint. Dr. Flint, in your presentation at B.B. Comer Library, you pretty much removed any doubt as far as you're concerned, as far as I'm concerned, about the authenticity of Go Set a Watchman.
That's correct. The idea that Tanya Carter, the lawyer, manipulated Nell into publishing a book she didn't want to publish is simply not true. The idea that Nell is not capable mentally of giving informed consent because she has memory loss or because she has dementia or because she's hard of hearing and didn't know what was going on, none of that's true. Because we visited her once a month ever since she's had her stroke, which means that we've been with her well more than 100 times. And the conversations range from the literature of C.S. Lewis, one of her favorite writers, to King Lear, to Midsummer Night's Dream, to British literature, American literature, what it's like in New York, her favorite restaurant, Italian restaurant in New York. So that's simply not true. Now, there is, I think, a very plausible story that this manuscript of Go Set a Watchman was truly lost in the real sense of that term. The most logical explanation of what happened to it was that it had been attached to the back of the original manuscript of To Kill a Mockingbird. So she had finished with To Kill a Mockingbird. To Kill a Mockingbird had been published, and she apparently stapled this earlier manuscript, which had been turned down, and she never was particularly impressed with her own writing. She always felt like a novice writer, and she needed the affirmation of an agent to tell her this is really good, or of Tay Hohoff, her agent, or her editor at Lippincott. And so my theory is that just as she thought To Kill a Mockingbird would sell maybe 5,000 copies and nobody else would ever see it and it would be forgotten, she probably, when Tay Hohoff said she wasn't interested in Go Set a Watchman, decided it was no good. So I think at that point, she simply gave up on Go Set a Watchman. It disappears. She takes the characters of Jim and Dill and Scout, and she crafts a different book set not in 1956, but in 1932 to 35. All the children are young, and the story is the narrative seen from the standpoint of the children. I think that then what she did is simply attach To Kill a Watchman, or Go Set a Watchman, to the back of it, sent it to Alice in Monroeville. I think Alice put it in the safety deposit box, and anybody who went in the safety deposit box after that, and probably there wasn't anybody except Alice and then her lawyer, Tanya Carter, would have seen To Kill a Mockingbird, would have flipped through it, and when they got to the second book, if they just kept flipping, they would have seen Jim and Dill and Scout, because there are a couple of scenes in Go Set a Watchman which are the same time period, 1932 to 35, as in To Kill a Mockingbird. And so if you just casually flip through, and if you're like Tanya Carter, she's not an expert in fiction. She doesn't read fiction very much. And so what you would do is if you flip through and saw the same characters, you'd say, well, this is just an alternative version.
Based on some of the material I've read, the Lee sisters had an extremely high regard for their father. And it's often thought that Atticus Finch is modeled after their father. Is that pretty much accurate?
Atticus Finch is very definitely modeled after A.C. Coley Lee, no doubt about it. Like almost any young person who's not been abused by their father, and especially true of young girls, you adore your father. There gets to be a time when you adore your mother, and then there's a time you don't adore either one of your parents. You think they're badly flawed, and then you come back to them in a later period of life. And in the case of Louise, Alice, Nell, Ed, their mother disappears from their life. Their mother has some problems. She spends time in Mobile. She spends time in Orange Beach, down on the coast. I mean, long periods of time, like she'll disappear for a year or two. And they go down one at a time to be with her briefly at the Gulf, and then they're back with their father. And they're African-American cooks and caregivers who take care of them like a mother would when she's not there. That's not to say their mother was never a part of their life. She was. But she was episodically a part of their life. So the bonding was to the father. As Louise described, Louise, the second of the three sisters, the middle sister, described their father. He was an interior Christian. And I said, well, Louise, what do you mean by an interior Christian? She said, I mean, he was not ostentatious. Mm-hmm. He didn't talk about his belief. He didn't try to convert people to his belief. He just walked the walk and talked the talk at the same time. He was what he seemed to be, an absolutely upright, moral man, trying to do the best he could in a flawed world. And the flawed world, that required him to be something other than this moral compass, is the world of Go Set a Watchman. And the father who was possible before the Civil Rights Movement took control of Monroeville, Alabama, is the Atticus of To Kill a Mockingbird.
As a very literate person and as a person who collects first editions, would you recommend Go Set a Watchman for everyone's library?
I would. And the reason I think you have to understand the chronology of the book. The first book she ever wrote, the first piece of art she ever created was Go Set a Watchman. And we're having trouble in America getting our head around the fact that this is the first piece of art. And the analogy I use with 6 months of reporters was try to think of Go Set a Watchman like the first Monet painting. In the 1860s, when Monet first began to paint the landscape of the little fishing village where he grew up, the coast of Normandy and Brittany, what he did was to create the first crafting of Impressionism. And so what you see, and I have some of his early, I love Monet and I love Impressionist art. So what you see in that first period of his life are seascapes, waterscapes, harborscapes, boats with flashes of light on ripples of water and these beautiful seascapes. Then later I've got some Monets who are his wife on a beach in the same vicinity. Then I've got one of his wife with their son on this beach. And by the time you get to the late Monets, the early 20th century Monets, what you're getting, the full explosion of Impressionism. But if you went to an art auction and you had the last Monet and you had the first Monet, obviously people would pay $50 million for the last Monet, but they'd pay $10 million for the first Monet. And it's not because the first Monet is great, it's because the first Monet has all the elements of Impressionism. That is the perfect analogy for To Kill a Mockingbird and Go Set a Watchman. Jim's there, Dill's there, Scout's there, Atticus is there. All of the characters, pretty much, some are invented for Go Set a Watchman who are different. But basically the story's there. The story of race is there. But the story of race in 1932-35, which is To Kill a Mockingbird, is the story of race when blacks knew their place and stayed in it. Therefore, whites could take the cause of a black man like Tom Robinson, defend Tom Robinson, because Tom Robinson and blacks in Monroeville were not the problem. 1956, when the first novel is written, was a period when blacks in Monroeville didn't know their place anymore, and they're pushing against the boundaries, and they're challenging apartheid, and now all of a sudden, Atticus Finch has to decide, as a white man living in Monroeville, when blacks are pushing from one direction and all the whites in Monroeville are pushing from another direction, and I'm a lawyer earning my living in this town, and I'm a member of the state legislature and people are trying to get me to run for governor, and I can do lots of good if I don't do what